So we have two speakers to help us along this journey. Leanne Ng is Director of Global Wellness and Benefits Strategy at OMers in Oxford. Leanne is responsible for the development and execution of the newly launched 2025 Global Wellness Strategy, as well as developing and the delivery of an enhanced benefit strategy. Leanne has more than 18 years experience in health and productivity fields, working with employers from all sectors and various industries. Leanne specializes in transformation of organizations' approach to managing health from a treatment model to a prevention model, just as we discussed around the development of a comprehensive workplace model throughout time. Our first speaker today is Wayne Clancy. Wayne Clancy is the founder and CEO of the MindSuite Analytics. Wayne has developed alternative and collaborative way of handling and managing perceptions and experiences for all stakeholders. He has developed interactive and real-time technologies to facilitate stakeholder co-creation and collaboration. He's currently working with New York Times bestselling author John King, author of Tribal Leadership, and has produced an easy-to-use predictive culture analytics with the Culture Gap Index. Please welcome Wayne.
So now here's something that is going to give you great value to go home with, that there's been lots of change and more to come in this crazy world that we live in, for sure. And, you know, effective leadership is more important than ever. And I think so often now everyone is talking about leadership and how it's changing. And leadership was actually in a huge change before we went into the COVID issues that are coming along right now. So there's even more chaos in that area. And we work with a lot of leadership groups. And leadership, one of the key elements here is that leadership teams are looking to better align around what their outcomes are organizationally now, because they have so many different things coming at them. It's very difficult for them to kind of get themselves organized in a way that they can work together. And, you know, we've seen quite a change in the whole approach that companies have to brand now. One of the key, you know, it used to be your brand was you had your external brand and that's how everything was. And then we started thinking over the internal brand. But now we look at what is organizational culture and performance. We got talent acquisition and retention, and we've also got customer acquisition and retention. So the whole idea around brand is far more expanded. And at the end of the day, you know, it's you know, somebody said at a conference, one of the meetings that I was on a little while ago, and it's starting to become more and more. We were B2C, B2B. Now we're H to H, humans to humans. And that is such a critical part of the strategy now on how we make things work. And with the way shifts have gone on, leaders now have to look at it and say to themselves, we need to engage people. It's not a we're right, they're wrong environment anymore. It has to be much more collaborative than it used to be, because for our brand to be strong, we have to make sure that we're able to get the right talent, have them properly engaged so we keep them, but also show ourselves externally in the marketplace that we are in support of ESG activities and different interrelated programs that go along with that. And one of the big things that we've seen in the last little while, and you know, we've been doing this now for 25 years, it's the human analytics side. And it's moving from a niche function in HR now to a critical leadership function. It used to be that the HR would lead the annual engagement study or employee satisfaction study or whatever it happens to be. But now organizations are looking at things a lot differently from a leadership perspective. And, you know, there's so many different things going on. I don't need to go through all these, everybody's seen them, but there's so many different themes happening now that organizations need to kind of get their head around and get their people around. And the best way is engaging everyone in that conversation, which gives them a lot more clarity. We are in a new world of work and performance. You know, with this hybrid model of remote work that people have gone into, you know, a lot of people are actually now in their community more than they are in their organization. And we've created some culture maps, and we measure actually community culture in a very similar way than organizations measure organizational culture. And we did a big study with the City of Toronto not long ago. And what we found was that the community culture and community humanity, which I'm going to talk a little bit now, the scores in the community were actually lower than organizational scores. So in a lot of big cities, people that, you know, when I was growing up, it was your safe place was your community. You know, I was a kid, and I'm older, but, you know, mom would open the door, be home for dinner. You know, your neighbors knew each other. My parents played bridge, you know, all that kind of stuff. Your community was your safe place, and people went to work. Now, your safer place is your work environment. And I don't mean safe because it's not. And then you go back to your communities. And so many cities now are very disconnected. We put a lot of the employees now went to remote work and have had to adjust to not being in an environment where a lot of the relationships and friendships were. And then, you know, now it's kind of, okay, you want to work remotely or come back to the office, and people going, I save 2 hours a day and $500 a month. I'm going to work from home. But what they're not measuring is the interconnectivity that people have from a tribal perspective, because people are like that. The energy of that idea that comes at the coffee machine and things. So there's a lot going on now with this whole work-life harmony and how it's all interrelated. And there aren't any good answers in that area, but it is something that is very important for us to think through. And, you know, there's a huge business case now for humanity and treating each other respectfully in the workplace and in our communities everywhere. We're moving away very dramatically from the I'm great, you're not control structure within organizations to one that's far more collaborative and getting people working that way. We, you know, when we talk about data, a lot of times you start talking about data, everybody runs for the exit. Oh, I don't want to hear about it. But at the end of the day, if it's simple and presented in a logical way, there's no greater civilizing force in good data because it can actually get people aligned. And one of the things that we as humans have that's a challenge is that we have cognitive bias. We will be trained to think certain ways and pass a lie detector test that is true, even if it isn't, because of the way that we have biases created in our minds. And leadership teams and work teams and everything else have these particular things. Good data can actually help break some of those cognitive biases so people are open to having new conversations. It can speed up the decision-making process. It can minimize that agenda pushing and get it into more of what the collaborative and enhance performance because it gets people focused on what it is rather than what we think it is. And that marriage of data, and as John King puts it, the art and the science actually is one of the key opportunities for us. You know, and historically, organizations have operated on a wobbly two-legged stool, financial and operating measurements. And that's what senior teams would look at. And a few years ago, quite a few years ago, I had a conversation with a CEO one time, and it was just kind of off the cuff. And I said, so do you measure your financial outcomes every 12 or 18 months? And he said, no, I look at those every day. And I said, well, do you measure your operating results every 12 or 18 months? He said, no, you're nuts. I look at those every week. I said, what's your most important asset? He said, oh, my people, of course. Oh, so you measure that every 12 or 18 months. And it was because, you know, companies would do the annual employee engagement study, and then it would kind of go off into a black hole, never to be seen again. And at the end of the day, the real opportunity is the human element is that stabilizing third leg of the stool, as we like to put it. And this is what we call a triadic model, that where a lot of our research has been developed. So, you know, we've created a research program system, and we've got a lot of data, and I'm going to share just a little bit of that with you today. And what we call to create a business case for humanity. And one of our partners in that, and we're a partnership model, one of the partners we have in that is Arizona State University Project Humanities. And ASU is ranked the most innovative university in the United States, with Stanford #2 and MIT #3. And a big thing for them is innovation and thinking that way. And what ASU did was they identified that they were turning out students who are less socially responsible than the ones they were getting. So they're taking nice kids, turning them into jerks to get a financial result. And the world was changing there. And they had heard of some empathy models that we had developed as the Mind Suite. And so we started measuring empathy. Where were we stripping away some of that humanity from people as they were going through our system? And a lot of it happens because younger people are developing their world vision, and a lot of times that cognitive training that goes on strips away some of that empathy. And while I was there, I was introduced to the Dean of Humanities, and I went to meet him, and And if you know Arizona State University, it's one of those big, beautiful American universities. And I go to meet Neil, and he's down in the basement of the building. And I go down, I talk to him, and he's got this project, Humanities, make the world a better place, push it out through individuals. And it was like he wasn't getting a lot of traction, which is very difficult. So I'm sitting there talking to him, and I kind of had to duck even. And I said, Neil, why are you in the basement? This is such an important project. I believe in having fun, frank conversations. And he said, well, because you can't measure humanity. And it's only the disciplines that you can measure that get the funding in that kind of an environment. And to me, who's been measuring complex human relationships for years, I left there and I actually went and I worked with John. We went back and looked at Aristotle, Socrates, modern philosophers, you name it. And we developed what we call 14 constructs of humanity. And we put them into our system and our model, and we started measuring how people treat each other through this humanity model and cross-referencing that to financial and operating outcomes. And sure enough, in the last 3 years that we've been measuring this, 100% of the companies that had high humanity scores were making more money. So we're starting to say it doesn't have to be this or that. We can have great culture and treat people really well within organizations and community structures and have very positive and high financial outcomes. And I think that's something that the world is shifting into and that we would all agree as we're going through. So we were looking to answer 3 key questions. How do we quantify the impact of culture of humanity? How do the various combinations of culture, humanity, and organizational metrics impact the operational and financial? And what is the design of a human performance, what we call continuous improvement system? So they have ongoing measurements as they go through. And another partner in this is John King, as I mentioned earlier, the Tribal Leadership book. And if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. And then John and I are currently authoring the Tribal Possibilities, where we're pulling in stories, real stories of things that are happening. The whole system is based upon 3 what we call triadic models. And I mentioned before, human, operating, and financial is one key triadic model. And for a triadic model to work, each of these supports the other 2. So the human side supports financial and operating supports human and financial, and financial supports human and operating. It's that simple. You can draw the little lines. In the triadic process for organizations, it's get people aligned around a common outcome, enable them to design their project, and then be prepared to refine and change. Because most organizations now, they set up their program and they design their system, and then it breaks down, back away. Okay, what's our new plan? And they go, it breaks down, they back away. They don't get themselves into the rhythm of ongoing measurement, which is a big part of why. And again, there's a lot of pieces here, and I'm not going to go into the detail of it, but just to give everybody an idea, we have systems and processes that we have. We have outcomes, which is collaboration, engagement, innovation. A lot of people don't think of innovation as an outcome, but it is. If you create the right environment, the right kind of culture within an organization, and that supports innovation, you will have innovation. And then the systems or processes, but we find that the biggest element that we're seeing now is the well-being. The well-being is far more than just whether people are healthy and eating well. There's resilience and the ability to come back and work through very difficult times, which is something that's being tested right now. There's physical wellness, mental focus, personal energy, and what we call interpersonal wellness, which is the humanity, and the impact that the group dynamic has on people and their well-being, which is very, very significant. And that's kind of where we come from on our humanity side, with performance obviously as the big outcome opportunity to go with it. We also, and I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on this, but we also are working with what we call an expanded integrated inclusion system. And ESG is a very significant part, and we do a lot of measurements in the green space and what's going on there, but also in the way that people actually interact. And there's more and more areas coming out and emerging in what we call inclusion and diversity. And you can see that there's many different areas: age, gender, body structure diversity is now coming out, place, location, function. And thought and cognitive diversity is a very significant part. Position, level, and class, political and faith diversity, and personal work style, et cetera. So there's a lot of different areas, and being able to celebrate how these different areas come together through common alignment. There's more alignment amongst groups than people think there are, because a lot of systems now look for what's different, not necessarily what's right. And when we can help people really get looking at how we can work together, it's amazing the kinds of systems that can come out of it. So that's kind of the core where it is. And I'm going to just show you very quickly a couple of some initial learnings that we've had. This is live. Our system is live on as we approach things. So now you can see that this is one of the programs that we have in what we call a checkup. And these scores are representing how well aligned they are with what people want. So when we get down into the 74, 77 areas, you can see that there's some very significant shifts that are happening in the way that people work. And what we've looked here is we can see things like strategy, for example, and we can see that, and this is 190 leaders that put this in. So this is a very large number of people who run organizations who all agree that we're really not very good at our strategy organizationally. And you can see some of the different areas that we look at when it comes to this. And one of the keys to this is what we call a priorities report. And these are things that, that are problematic. And you can see wellness comes up in a lot of the top 10 elements here, which is very significant. People are not waking up feeling refreshed. At the end of the day, I feel I have energy left over. I exercise regularly. These are all areas that are not working very well with the leadership group, which is a very significant thing that people need to work on. What are some things that are working well? People are getting outside a little bit more, there's social contact, etc. So you can see where some of the key elements are in these particular areas as we go through. One of the things that I thought I would show you is we've done something called a pandemic checkup. And the pandemic checkup, the purpose of that was to get an idea on where we are today versus where we were pre-pandemic. And in the pandemic checkup, you can see where some of the results are, have come out of this. And we looked at 4 key areas. What are strategic elements within organization? What are cultural elements within organizations? Character and humanity and the elements that we measure there, and well-being. And you can see here that there's been a bit of a drop from a strategy point of view. Some of the elements have gone down a little bit. And you can see here, that hasn't gone down a lot, but, a little bit. Like our reputation, a lot of people feel has dropped a little bit from that perspective. Culture elements have gone down a little bit, but one of the areas of great concern is the well-being side. It's a 13-point drop. And you can see here from before the pandemic, things like for being a healthy eater, people 85% now to 74. And we learned little things like when people went to the office, they would have an hour for lunch, they'd grab a healthy sandwich, and that was it. They work from home, they walk by their fridge 12 times a day. There's subtle and small things that are occurring right now that we need to be very aware of. People aren't exercising regularly because a lot of the gyms and things. Falling asleep, waking up refreshed. So you can see that there's a number of areas from a well-being, mental health and well-being point of view that we really need to be aware of and in front of as a society, and especially for leaders within organizations. Now, the good news, and there's some good news that came out of this, through all of this, we're actually being nicer to each other and treating each other better. Our humanity has gone up 9 points as we go through. And these are some of the key areas that we looked at. In terms of most people are kind and generous and go out of the way to help each other out. Pre-pandemic, it was at 80. Now it's up at 91%. So people are actually going out of their way. They're showing more compassion for others. Diversity and inclusion is actually improving in a lot of areas, as people want to contribute and work together more effectively. Empathy is increasing dramatically. Fairness. Forgiveness, people are being far more forgiving for things that are occurring. Friendliness, integrity, as we go through, kindness, all of these are going up. One of the interesting ones is temperance, and it's only gone up a little bit compared to the others. So people are losing it, but the good news is that people are being far more forgiving of what goes on and things like that. So, and again, we can share more of this information if you want to get through to, hold of anybody within our team. We're happy to share more of this information, but it gives you an idea on some of the different elements and things that are going on within the environments that we're in. One last quick one. This is what John and I have created, which is called the Possibilities Checkup, which is a lot of different areas that we look at that organizations need to look at from a human perspective. And these are things like culture, engagement, partnership, and I don't need to read them all, but there's far more in there. And our ability to capture this over an ongoing period of time where people are sharing a little bit of information every day, it's really helpful in organizations being able to cross-reference these types of analytics with some of the financial outcomes. So a lot of them are saying once they start doing this and listening to people and engaging people in the process, their financial outcomes are actually increasing while these numbers are as well. And a part of our mission is to help show that there is a business case for humanity and we can treat each other better and still have the kind of financial outcomes we need to make sure that we're able to support organizations effectively and our business related models that we have, especially in North America and most of Europe as well. So that's about it. I'm open for any kinds of questions if anybody has any or a discussion.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Leanne Ng, Director of Global Wellness and Benefit Strategy at OMers Oxford. Very happy to see some familiar names within the participation list there. So happy to reconnect virtually, but also very, very pleased and honored to share sort of our journey today here at OMers. So with that in mind, I thought what I would do is set the stage a little bit in terms of taking a walk back to review how some of us thought about workplace wellness and the positioning thereof to sort of gain traction and get the attention, like Wayne talked about, within the C-suite to ensure that we're baking it into the culture and infusing that in a more fulsome way. So Tiffany, next slide, if you don't mind. So how we used to think and position our organizational well-being is, I'm sure a lot of you would probably recognize this, and for those students within, Centennial College, you probably see this a lot as well, is looking at this illness-wellness continuum from Dr. Travis. So while it's slightly dated, it's still very much the fundamental of how we look at wellness within not only the workplace, but by and large, population health as well. So really ensuring that, while we're looking at wellness and getting it on sort of the agenda for C-suites, for managers, for people leaders, we would often tie it back to this is the why. This is why it's important, because we see that on one end, obviously we have wellness, on the other end, we have premature death or any sort of catastrophic illness or injuries. And we wanted to get these folks productive, re-engaged in work, so that way we are being productive. So where we saw those linkages was very much around, okay, well, perhaps we're talking about disability, we're talking about illness, we're talking about all these symptomatic type notions that it makes sense for wellness to be baked in from potentially a benefits or a disability standpoint. I will tell you that is no longer the case, and it's not good enough. I personally, even when I started into this space, really drove home the notion that for me personally, I needed to find a link or find a way to ensure that I was just not looking at wellness, well important, but there was that additional add-on. For me, it was disability. That's where I drew a lot of my experience from. And so with that in mind, we're now seeing this shift, as Alan talked about, where we're looking at ESG and how that really incorporates. But I will tell you, not every organization is quite there yet, which is why it's important that we look at how, if you are working or thinking about working within an organization, understand where those linkages exist, so that way you have that infusion and that integration between wellness and other strategic priorities. Next slide, Tiffany, please. So when we think about well-being, and as I mentioned earlier, so the sustainability, ESG, I talked about benefits, but what we're seeing within the market space, just not here within Canada, but outside of Canada as well, is that there are other tangents that well-being can play very nicely with or integrate with outside of those two other elements I talked about. So DEI, diversity, equality, inclusion. At OMers Oxford, we call it inclusion diversity. I'll touch a little bit more on that. Performance, so talent development. This is another biggie for a lot of organizations, especially as we look at retaining and attracting top talent in this very, very tight market. You'd have heard Wayne talk about engagement. Yes, there's a direct correlation between wellness and engagement strategies or experience strategies. We're talking about purpose and, of course, health and safety, as Tiffany mentioned within the model that the OWHC has in play. So all very common. I would say that the DEI, the sustainability, the purpose are all sort of newer type integrations that some organizations haven't made that direct correlation as of yet. But again, the take home for this slide is that it's just not good enough to look at the benefits or a singular type of integration. It should be baked in throughout the organization, and there are a multitude of possibilities in order for an organization, an employer, a population to do so. Next slide, Tiffany, please. All right, so what are we doing here at OMers Oxford? Next slide. So before I actually tell you and unwrap what specifically our approach to wellness and how we integrate, I wanted to take another step back to sort of lay the foundation in terms of where we are seeing well-being within OMers Oxford. So well-being is within and held within our HR function, more so within our total rewards function. Now, I will tell you, this is not the model that OMers Oxford is following explicitly. This was, credit due to Mercer Canada for positioning this, but I thought it really played nicely in terms of explaining the importance and how we look at integration in terms of total rewards or from the employee experience. So with this triangle, essentially at the very, very bottom to the foundation is where we look at culture. So this is organizational culture. Some employers have fantastic cultures, other not so much. So this is sort of the building blocks in terms of how we look and how other things are built upon that, like compensation and benefits. So compensation benefits are mainstays. They are often the first thing if you think of a new employee is going to look at, are they paying me enough? Are my benefits rich enough for my needs currently? So this is what we would call contractual or competitive type advantages. So like I said, these are mainstays. These are never going to change. It's part of the employment deal that individuals have with the employer. The next tier up is where we start to see differentiations. So where we start to see leading employers start to make headway over employers who are just really concerned about, are we paying people enough and are employees good enough? So this is where we see wellness or well-being and growth and development or mentoring or career paths brought it to the table. So this is where we tap into the experiential. So really ensuring that people feel different, people feel tied to the organization, and there's meaning behind what they're doing. And then finally, at the very pinnacle, very top of this triangle, where it's a unique, maybe not so much, but a few years ago, positioning, we're by purpose. So what we do, tying into the emotional aspect as us as humans, because the question that we always have is, what is my purpose? What am I here to do? How am I going to make a change? So this is where we start to see leading organizations start to tie in that purpose with ESG or their sustainability type models. So you'll see from an OMers Oxford standpoint what that looks like. So with that in mind, this triangle very much dictates how employers may be looking at their approach to well-being and how it ties into the larger total rewards or employee experience standpoint. Next slide, Tiffany. Thank you. So here at OMers Oxford, what we've done, we've positioned well-being within our larger people strategy. So this is our, within HR, this is our mantra. This is what we do day in and day out, and ensuring that we are being measured against our outputs and our outcomes within these 4 key areas. So within OMers, obviously we are a pension plan, so we have a pension promise to our pension members, and this is what we do, and this is what we firmly believe in. So this is our purpose and our reason for being. So the wellness strategy sits within that sort of highlighted box there, which is create a rewarding employee experience. And this is where we want to ensure that we're providing tools, we're providing resources, we're empowering our employees to bring their best selves to work in order for them to succeed. Now, we are just not worried about the performance aspect You heard Wayne talk about that social connection. That's a very important thing here at OMers Oxford. We want to ensure that that is happening throughout the organization as well. So when we look at well-being or wellness within OMers, it is, like I said, a strategy. You would have heard Tiffany mention that we launched our 5-year comprehensive global strategy, and this was launched earlier this year. We are very lucky within this organization that we have a chief medical officer who is spearheading this. Our CHRO is very much on board, and very, very happy to be working with an organization where wellness is on the agenda, and it's going to stay on the agenda for a very long time. For instance, again, going back to Wayne's earlier presentation, really ensuring that C-suite or our folks who sit at the very top of the organization are engaged. I was very happy and very pleased to have actually presented our outcomes, very much like how we present our financial outcomes to our C-suite yesterday. So they're in tune, they know what's going on, and it's just not, well, we don't know, we don't care, so we'll just sweep it under the rug and call it a day. That's not the case here at OMers Oxford. So with that in mind, like I said, our strategy is global. It reflects our genuine care and concern, not only for our employees' well-being, but for the well-being of our communities at large and our pension members. So again, this is where we see that integration. It's just not about our employees, it's about our larger communities in which we operate, but also within our plan members. So with that in mind, you see the other components to our people strategy. Yes, we can make the case as to where wellness could ultimately sit, whether it's growing our culture, being a leading employer, investing in our people. But the decision was made that it really sits within creating creating a rewarding employee experience. Next slide, Tiffany. So as we look at our people experience, we're going to take a bit of a deeper dive. So you see there again the 4 buckets. Under these buckets, we actually have 3 main pillars that hold up those buckets or hold up our people experience strategy by and large. And this is where we see further integration of well-being, just not within our people strategy, but within these other 3 buckets or pillars that are mentioned below. So our D, E, and I approach, again, is called inclusion diversity, and we see growth and development, and then we have well-being there. So I'm not going to go through what each of them mean. I think they're pretty self-explanatory for the group. But within these 3 pillars, we've worked very hard with my counterpoints to ensure that we have cross-pollination, and we're taking a no wrong door approach for wellness or any one of these 3 pillars. So for instance, when we look at inclusion, diversity, and well-being, we met with one of our ERGs, the briefcase parents, to look at how we can better the situation around returning parents from parental leave. And we're very happy to have launched a gradual return to work mandate that is in place for all of our global employees when they return from a parental leave, regardless if it's of a primary or secondary caregiver. Another example is looking at well-being and that growth and development. So what we've done and what we've integrated is that when we take a look at performance, year-end performance discussions, we've really worked hard to look at that resilience and bake in resilience training within our people leaders and for employees. We're also ensuring that our people leaders know how to have those tough conversations around not only performance, but well-being. We want to ensure that wellness is a leading indicator as well for that growth and development of the individual, but by and large, our organization. So another case in point is that when we look and we develop scorecards for each of our key business leaders, one of those scorecard metrics is around wellness. And part of that is looking at right now, vacation metrics. People told us they didn't feel supported to take time away from work to feel rested and recharged. So we're going to hold our people leaders' feet to the fire. Part of that is seeing what is going on within that organization, within that business function, and then measuring that within each and every quarter. And if they don't hit their mark, then obviously it's going to be reflected within their performance come year end. So again, these are examples of how we bake in wellness and integrate it so that it's not a standalone, and that there's going to be success as we look and we again foster, but embed by a slow drip method that notion of wellness. It takes time, like any organization. We are a big ship, small rudder. So there has to be time in order for folks to play catch up and understand that this is a newer type of consideration, and it's here to stay. Next slide, please, Tiffany. Now, outside of our people experience strategy or people strategy full stop, we have something called purpose at work. So our purpose at work is basically our ESG approach to ensure that we are not looking at any one of our forward-facing type approaches in a silo. We're looking at it from a larger business context, so that way we are wrapping our arms around everything. Sorry, folks, if you're not on mute, can I just ask that you go on mute, please? Just getting a bit of feedback. Thank you. So with that in mind, our purpose at work is designed to unite, like I said, existing purpose-driven activities. So that way we are enhancing and pushing forward with better outcomes, again, within our workplace, but also within our larger communities. So you see within this diagram, the OMers sort of branding is in the middle. And then you see here, inclusion, diversity, wellness, plan advocacy. So plan advocacy in terms of our pension plan, global citizenship. We are global in nature. We are located in 9+ countries. Sustainability, growth and development. And then you see around the larger circle there, the community, volunteering, giving, and everyday actions. So again, you're going to hear me say infusing, slow drip. This is part of that. We really are looking at this from a comprehensive, meaningful way. And that way it's really baked into everything that we're doing. And you would have heard me talk to that purpose. If you think back to that triangle that I talked to earlier, this is that tip that I was mentioning for OMers Oxford. Our purpose at work is very much where we are driving our notion, embedding within our employees, but also our plan members, what we are here to do and how we go about doing it. So you see there how we do our work, how we support each other, and what we stand for and how we show up. This is important to us, and we want to ensure that this is what we are living and breathing. It is really to tie together all of our existing purpose-driven activities, so that way we're taking that forward momentum approach. So Tiffany, next slide, please. So this sort of speaks to what Wei was talking about and a little bit to what James was talking about as well in terms of his questions around integrating or starting strategies is simply not enough. So the intent, while good, while you make those sort of linkages behind the scenes, you need to go deeper if you are going to want to have and measure success. So moving on to the next slide, what we can see is that we here at OMers Oxford are not only just linking those strategies, we're looking at data across the board. So this is over and on top of HR internal type of metrics. So you see demographics, benefits experience, health and safety, disability. D&T stands for data and technology. So I'll spend a bit of time, I'll loop back and what that means. Leave and LOA type data, performance, growth development, and then also our engagement or experience metrics. But moving back to our data and technology, this was a link that maybe wasn't so apparent for me anyways when I first started OMers, but it really came forward that here within our internal organization, we have a very strong, very innovative type of D&T team. So we have worked very closely with them to take a look at how wellness is impacted by this return to work. So looking at our different global positionings, looking at our individuals who have returned to office, looking at sort of movement, of course, ensuring that we have privacy and confidentiality baked into our metrics and reporting. But we're also looking at burnout in terms of after hours work, looking at multitasking, looking at employee and manager coaching one-to-one time. So at least that way we're making those cross inferences where we can, because again, it's just not enough to have those programs, to have those strategies. We need to demonstrate sort of what the impact is and what the return if you're looking at return. Here at OMers, yes, ROI is important, But even more important, we know this is the right thing to do, especially in the light of the pandemic. Coming out of the pandemic, we know that a lot of these issues are here to stay. For us who have been in wellness for quite some time, it's just the pandemic was basically lifting the lid off of that Pandora's box, because a lot of these issues were already in existence. The pandemic just amplified it an nth amount of time. So with that in mind, again, my take home is that it's not enough to just link those strategies. You have to bake in sort of what those metrics are and determine what your KPIs are. So data is always your friend when you're probably smiling behind the scene there, but we very much are not afraid of what those outcomes tell us, even if they're not where we thought they would be. It's an indication of where we are to go next and where we should be peeling back. So please, for those folks who are working with data, with your employer, if it is not giving you what you hope for in terms of insights, it just means that you need to take a bit of a detour to course correct. So again, don't be scared, don't be shy of it. Data is your friend at the end of the day. So that's everything from my end. Thank you so much, everyone. Opening up to questions from the group to see if there's anything that you would like to touch on or take a deeper dive on.
You can learn more about the OWHC. You can follow us. We have a website. You can sign up for our quarterly newsletter full of really good information. We are all over social media. You could email us. You can also join the OWHC. We have memberships for individuals and organizations. And if you're interested in partnering with us, learning about how we can support each other in our initiatives, reach out, absolutely. And coming up next for OWHC members is the annual general meeting. So please stay on if you are a member. And for everybody else, thank you so much for participating today. And thank you again to our speakers.